Welcome to the inaugural hearing for the Armed Services Committee's panel on defense financial management and accountability reform. The panel met to organize on July 13th and had our first informal briefing last week. We've adopted an organizational plan, including a detailed work plan, to assist us in examining the progress the Department of Defense has made in improving financial management and achieving audit readiness, and identifying the challenges that remain. Without objection, I would like to enter the organizational plan in the record for today's hearing. But more important than the details of our oversight agenda, Chairman McKeon and Ranking Member Smith have charged this body with making recommendations and providing continuity of leadership on this issue. Therefore, I'd like to take a moment to introduce each of the panel members and thank them for their commitment to join Rob and me as we continue the work of the previous Defense Acquisition Panel. In addition to my partner, Rob Andrews of New Jersey, the following members will serve on the panel: Scott Riggle from Virginia, Joe Courtney from Connecticut, Stephen Palazzo of Mississippi, Tim Ryan of Ohio, Todd Young of Indiana. They'll be embarrassed that they weren't here to hear their names read and bragged on, all that kind of good stuff. The first question on the panel's work plan addresses whether DOD's current financial improvement and audit readiness strategy, methodology, and timeliness are appropriate. I feel this is an important, appropriate starting point, as DOD has initiated numerous efforts over the years to address its financial management weaknesses and achieve audit readiness with little or no success. In fact, for over 20 years now, GAO and DOD auditors have continued to report significant weaknesses in DOD's ability to provide timely, reliable, and useful information for decision-making and reporting. In these difficult fiscal times, it's absolutely crucial that DOD has reliable information to manage its resources. Having reliable information is especially critical as DOD attempts to implement the $178 billion in cuts and efficiencies proposed by former Secretary of Defense, not to mention how important it is for DOD if DOD is forced to look for further significant cuts in the near future. The Department of Defense also needs to provide assurance to the American taxpayer that they are not wasting resources. However, because of DOD's poor internal controls, the financial management area has been on GAO's list of high-risk programs that are vulnerable to waste, fraud, and abuse since 1995. The Defense Authorization Act 2010 requires that DOD's financial statements be ready for audit by no later than September 30, 2017. Today we will hear about DOD's strategy and methodology to get the Department of Defense to audit readiness by 2017 and the challenges that the Department faces to achieving that goal. We do not expect to discuss all the challenges DOD is facing in great detail in this hearing, but it's a good starting point to understanding what the Department is up against in its financial improvement efforts. I expect the panel will hold future hearings that will cover in much more detail the challenges that the Department is facing in their efforts to resolve the issues. I'd like to thank our witnesses in advance for their testimony and agreeing to be here at such an early hour. Our witnesses today are the Honorable Robert Hale, Undersecretary of Defense Comptroller, the Honorable Elizabeth McGrath, Deputy Chief Management Officer, Department of Defense, Mr. Asif Khan, Director of Financial Management and Assurance at GAO. I'd now like to turn to Rob Andrews for any remarks he'd like to make. Rob?
Well, good morning to my colleagues. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We thank you for your attendance at this early hour. I want to thank Chairman Conway for his leadership on this panel. It's been a pleasure to work with him the last couple of years to roll up our sleeves, and I'm very much looking forward to continuing that effort. And I also want to take a minute and introduce Congressman Jim Cooper, who is a member of our full committee, who's the ranking member on the Oversight Committee, who I commend for having the zeal to be here at this hour to participate in this. You can't make good decisions without good information. And when it comes to the complexity of the Department of Defense, you can't have good information without financial statements. And we don't have them. Now, most people hear that and think that's the result of some sinister conspiracy to hide money or this or that. That's simply not true. What is true is that the Department of Defense is probably the most complex organization in the world. It is actually multiple organizations under the same organizational rubric. It does just about everything, and it's organized just about everywhere. So, and it's a sui generis organization. You know, the way you value a hotel or a shopping mall is not the way you'd value Andrews Air Force Base, a very well-named installation here in the country. So I want to dispel from the outset the notion that the reason we don't have these statements is some military-industrial conspiracy to hide things from the public. That's not true. What is true is two other things. One is it's a complex task to figure out how to get from where we are today to where we need to be, which is good auditable financial statements. But the second is it's doable. And I think you're going to hear from this panel today that these are folks involved in getting it done. And the briefing we had last week showed that there has been a sincere, concerted, focused effort from Secretary Hale and his team, and we're anxious to try to be a resource in making that happen so that the members of Congress and the public can make well-informed decisions about future expenditures in this department. So I look forward to hearing what the witnesses have to say, and glad to join you this morning.
Well, thank you. With that, I'll turn the microphones over to the panel, whoever wants to start, and however you want to do it. So, Bob.
I think I'll
all right.
start. Well, good morning, Congressman Conaway, Congressman Andrews, members of the panel. Thank you for the opportunity to testify this morning on financial management improvements at the Department of Defense. Secretary Leon Panetta, our new Secretary of Defense, shares your interest and mine in improving financial management at DOD and has asked that I provide him a comprehensive review of our efforts in the near future, and I look forward to getting his personal guidance on this topic. To bring you up to date on our progress, the Department's Deputy Chief Management Officer, Ms. Beth McGrath, and I have prepared a joint statement, which we've submitted for the record. We'll jointly summarize that statement. We're going to do tag team. I'll start out. Beth will join midway on some of the IT system issues, and I'll finish up. I believe that defense financial managers have three broad goals. They need to help the Department acquire the resources necessary to meet national security objectives. This is the key goals, the budget goal, if you will. Second, they need to ensure that once those resources are enacted, they are spent in a manner that is legal, effective, and efficient. And that goal probably encompasses many that we'll talk about today. And third, they need to champion a strong financial management workforce, because if we don't do that, we won't be able to accomplish the other goals. The first thing I'd like to note is that as we work to meet national security objectives, DOD financial management has its strengths. Mainly, we are effective, in my view, in meeting the needs of our warfighters, the financial management needs, financial needs of our warfighters. And that's a key goal, maybe the most important one for me. We also have a dedicated workforce of more than 60,000 financial management professionals, and through personal experience, I can tell you, they bring a culture of stewardship to their jobs. They worry about whether or not this money is spent effectively. We also have effective financial processes in some key areas. As a result, violations of key financial laws are few in the Department of Defense. Timely and accurate payments are the rule, and interest associated with late payments is quite low. Financial managers have also made some progress on the areas that I know of, in an area that I know is of particular interest, I should say, to this panel, namely the financial improvement and audit readiness area. I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. There's some other things that we do I wanted to cover before I get to the FIRE plan. We are working to try to improve financial information. That's key. Partly in response to congressional direction, we are working to improve information on the number and costs of contractors employed by DOD. We're also working to further improve training for financial managers by implementing a course-based certification program similar to the one available to or now in place for acquisition managers. Financial managers have partnered with the Deputy Chief Management Officers to ensure implementation of proposed efficiencies. Last year, DOD proposed efficiencies and streamlining totaling $178 billion in fiscal 12 to 16. We recently completed an internal review of plans for achieving those efficiencies, and I'm pleased to report that the services and agencies, I believe, are developing credible plans and processes to meet these demanding goals, and they're clearly taking this effort seriously. We've also made progress improving financial information and achieving audit readiness. That's a topic I know that is of particular interest to this panel. It is of particular interest to me. We've already achieved and are maintaining auditable statements in some key entities, the Army Corps of Engineers, a number of our defense agencies, and several of our large trust funds. But it's also clear that the greatest audit challenges lie ahead, especially the need to move the military services toward auditability. In addition, there are enterprise-wide weaknesses in DOD financial management which require an enterprise-wide response. To pass an audit, an organization has got to have systems and processes that record financial results of business events in a consistent and reliable manner. Our processes and systems don't always meet that standard. Many of the systems are old. They don't record information in the level of detail that's required for an audit. Our processes are sometimes variable across commands, even across bases. These issues are especially challenging in the Department of Defense because DOD's enormous size and geographical dispersion mean we just can't rely on manual solutions or workarounds as many other agencies have been able to do. To deal with these enterprise challenges and to improve financial information and achieve audit readiness, we revised our approach that we've taken. Obviously it hasn't worked over the past 17 years since the Government Management and Reform Act. Since August 2009, our emphasis has been on improving the quality of our data and moving toward audit readiness for the information that we use to manage the department every day, specifically budgetary information, because we manage the department based on budgets, and the counts and availability, counts and location of our assets, which is key to our warfighters. Auditors call it existence and completeness. We've also put in place a cost-effective approach for dealing with other information required for full auditability. Less than 2 years have passed since we launched this new approach. I can say without hesitation or reservation, financial auditability is now readily acknowledged as a high priority in the department, and that was not true in some previous terms that I have served in the department. And we have made noteworthy changes. We have a clear governance process. There's somebody in charge here. It's the Chief Management Officer, the Deputy Secretary for the Department of Defense, supported on a day-to-day basis by the Chief Financial Officer, me, and also the Deputy Chief Management Officer, and an analogous organization at the service levels, the CMOs, the undersecretaries in that case in charge, aided by their Assistant Secretaries for Financial Management and also the Deputy Chief Management Officers. We've established long-term and, more importantly, short-term goals, which are actively managed by our governance process. We need to have goals that we can check are happening over the next couple of years, not just 2017. We ensured that each military department has programmed adequate resources to support this refocused strategy, and they've done that over the full future years defense plan, so about 5 years. We now require that senior executive performance appraisals for both financial and non-financial personnel include financial audit goals where they are relevant, so we're trying to get this outside the comptroller community. We're assembling teams within each military department that will be tasked with improving financial controls. I told you they're too variable and sometimes they don't meet audit standards. We've got to fix them. The systems will help, but they alone are not the full solution. We are in the process of establishing a course-based certification program for defense financial managers that I hope will provide a framework and, among other things, ensure that we provide training to our people on accounting and audit issues. And we've maintained a close working relationship with our oversight bodies, including the Government Accountability Office and the Department's Inspector General. I personally briefed Gene Dodaro, the Comptroller General, on this plan, also Gordon Hiddell, the DOD IG. In addition, we have focused on improvements in business systems, and I'm now to ask my colleague Beth McGrath to discuss our system efforts.
Good morning. I too appreciate the opportunity to discuss financial management improvements at the Department of Defense. As the Deputy Chief Management Officer, I am responsible for instituting a framework that clearly defines business goals, develops meaningful performance measures, and aligns activities through established and repeatable processes. The purpose of DOD's overarching management agenda is to establish an effective, agile, innovative business environment that is fiscally responsible. This business environment includes many IT solutions, which are essential enablers of a broader set of integrated business operations rather than an ends unto themselves. While I acknowledge past challenges, there are a number of things that we are doing, putting together on these programs to ensure that they are on the right path, to ensure that the future programs are structured for success. We are deliberately tying acquisition decisions on our major programs with business outcomes such as financial auditability. We are ensuring that programs complete proper business process reengineering to make certain we are not automating inefficient processes and that the Department is prepared for the new system and the process prior to implementation. We're analyzing business investment from a cross-functional perspective. Mr. Hale noted that we are ensuring that the financial auditability goals are part of other than financial managers' performance appraisals. It is because of their significant contribution to our ability to achieve audit readiness. It takes everyone, every functional area must participate. We're adopting the concept of end-to-end processes and standard development methodologies into the business enterprise architecture. Together, this will enable a more holistic way of thinking into the management of our business operations and ensure we have a shared understanding of our architecture so that we can achieve the interoperability that we're discussing. We're implementing a new acquisition process for our defense business systems that is tailored to the new requirements of the business area. Guidance for this process, called the Business Capabilities Lifecycle, has been released and is being used today. Our goal is to deliver a streamlined 21st century systems environment consisting of IT capabilities that work together to support efficient, effective business operations. I would like to note that GAO's removal of the DOD Personal Security Clearance Program from its high-risk list is a significant first in the Department, and it owes its success to our commitment to this results-oriented, end-to-end approach that I just described. In closing, we are committed to improving management and acquisition of IT systems as it contributes to the overall business operations, again, to include financial auditability. These issues receive significant management attention, and they are a key part of our overarching strategy to build a better business environment, business processes, and systems that create results our men and women in uniform need. I look forward to continuing our work with this panel as we strive together toward greater efficiency and effectiveness and to create an agile business space enabled by modern interoperable IT solutions. I look forward to your questions.
Okay, so we've made a lot of process improvements in business systems, governance, funding. But I want to do more than that. We need to actually start doing some audits and validations. It will focus us on the real problems, and so we have begun doing that. We've launched an audit of the Marine Corps Statement of Budgetary Resources. If successful, this would be the first time any military service has actually completed an audit of a financial statement. And we're learning a great deal. We've brought an independent public accountant in, and they do this for a living, so they know what the problems are. We've learned so much from that audit already. In May, we began a DOD-wide examination and validation of our funds control and distribution process. It's known in audit terms as appropriations received. Again, an independent public accounting firm is doing that for us. I expect this validation will yield positive results next month. Periodic validation of our funds control process is very important to me. It also should be important to you because it will reassure you that we are issuing and controlling our funds in ways that ensure we comply with the laws that you enact. In June, we began a validation by a public accounting firm of the Army's new General Fund Enterprise Business System. It's Enterprise Resource Planning System, GFEBS, at those bases where GFEBS has been installed and is mature. This is also very important because it will identify areas that must be improved, and there are going to be some, I'm sure, to be sure that we are using that system in a manner that's auditable. I'm not so worried about the system. I'm worried about all the feeders and the processes that are associated with it. And I don't want to get these systems deployed throughout the Department of Defense and find out or have somebody find out 3 or 4 years from now that they're not auditable. So we will cycle through the other services with that same approach as we can. In July, we tasked a public accounting firm to validate the Air Force's processes and controls to reconcile their accounts with Treasury, essentially our checkbook with Treasury. It's called funds balance with Treasury. And again, another key step, and I'm cautiously optimistic we'll get positive results there. And by the end of this calendar year, we expect to begin several other validation efforts, including the counts and locations of large portions of our military equipment. In short, I would tell you there's still a lot to do. I've focused on the positive side, but I am not naive. We've got a long way to go. There are still enterprise-wide weaknesses that we have not resolved. We need to institute a culture of financial controls in the department, consistent ones that don't yet exist. But we are committed to improving financial information and audit readiness of the Department of Defense, and I believe we've made significant progress. Our goal is to achieve fully auditable statements by 2017. That concludes our opening statement, and after Mr. Khan finishes, we'd welcome your questions.
Mr. Khan.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Andrews, and members of the panel. It's a pleasure to be here today to discuss DOD financial management improvement efforts and how it's going to achieve auditability. At the outset, I really want to thank this panel for inviting us here. We believe that focused attention, such as these panels, is the key to corrective actions within the Department of Defense. In my testimony today, I'm going to be providing GAO's perspective on the status of DoD's financial management weaknesses and the efforts to resolve them. In addition to that, I'll also touch upon some of the challenges which DoD continues to face in improving its financial management operations. My testimony is based on our prior work within the Department of Defense. Regarding the status, for more than a decade, DoD has dominated GAO's list of federal programs and operations at high risk due to their susceptibility to fraud, waste, abuse, and mismanagement. In the last 20 years, as a result of significant management weaknesses, none of the DoD military departments, Army, Navy, or the Air Force, have been able to prepare auditable financial statements. DoD's past strategies for improving its financial management have generally been ineffective. But recent initiatives and what we have heard this morning they're encouraging and show promise. Specifically, recent changes to the DoD plan for financial improvement and audit readiness. The FIRE plan, if implemented effectively, could result in improved financial management and progress towards auditability. The Army, Navy, Air Force, and the Defense Logistics Agency have key roles in implementing the plan. However, DoD does face many challenges in overcoming its long-standing financial management weaknesses. I'm going to briefly highlight 6 of these major challenges. The first one of the toughest challenges in implementing the FIRE plan is sustaining committed leadership. The DoD Comptroller has expressed commitment to the FIRE goals and has established a focused approach to achieving the FIRE long-term goals that is intended to help the DoD achieve near-term successes as well. To succeed in the long-term efforts to improve financial management needs to be cross-functional. DoD agencies and offices that perform business functions, for example, weapon system acquisitions and supply chain management, have to work together, as financial management function is dependent on the information received from these two functions, and vice versa. These two functions also need financial management information in order to perform their functions effectively. However, within every administration, and of course between administrations, there are changes in leadership. It is paramount that the FIRE plan and other current initiatives be institutionalized throughout the department at all working levels. The second one is a competent financial management workforce with the right knowledge and skills is needed to implement the FIRE plan. Effective financial management requires a knowledgeable, skilled workforce that includes individuals who are trained and well-versed in government accounting practices and information technology. Analyzing skills needed and then building and retaining an appropriately skilled workforce are needed for DoD to succeed in its transformation effort. The third one is accountability and effective oversight of the improvement efforts. DoD has established bodies responsible for governance and oversight of the FIRE plan implementation. It will be critical for senior leadership in each of the DoD components to ensure that oversight of the financial improvement projects and efforts is effective and that responsible officials are held accountable for the progress. Fourth, a well-defined enterprise architecture. For DoD, a key element of modern financial management and business operations is the use of integrated information systems with the capability of supporting a vast and complex business operations. A well-defined enterprise architecture will be needed as DoD blueprints for modernizing its business systems. However, DoD has yet to address previously identified issues associated both with the architecture and investment management. The fifth one, which is linked to the prior points I'd made, is enterprise resource planning, or ERP systems. These are expected to form the core of the business information systems in the DoD components. Their effective implementation is effective to improving DoD financial management and related business operations, and will be key to becoming auditable. However, the components have largely been unable to implement ERPs that deliver the needed capability on schedule and within budget. Effective business system modernization across DoD is key to achieving hundreds and millions of dollars in annual savings. Finally, weaknesses in DoD's internal controls over financial management and are a pervasive and primary factor in DoD's inability to become auditable. DoD needs a practical approach to prioritize these internal control weaknesses and to correct them within a reasonable period of time. In closing, I'm encouraged by the recent efforts showed and the commitment by DO leaderships. However, the Department's ability to address these 6 weaknesses, or the 6 major challenges that I've highlighted today, will be a major factor in reaching auditability. Mr. Chairman, these are my remarks for the morning. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have. Thank you.
Mr. Khan, thank you, panelists. Without objection, I think everybody will go on the 5-minute clock, so that way we get well way through. So I'll start us. Bob, yesterday you talked to the Senate about, on the most recent analysis under fire, that you had made 5 of the 25.
You had a spy there, sir.
Yeah, we pay attention, or try to. 5 of those short-term goals, and you've now extended 20 of those. Were there consequences to the folks who did the 5 versus the folks who did not get the 20? Is your accountability system in place yet to hold managers accountable for that? Has it been implemented?
You know, I think we're still getting to the point where, I mean, certainly nobody was fired and shouldn't have been. Many of those were interim goals. As I told you, we met a number of them. We're going to meet within this fiscal year the key goals that concern me: appropriations received, funds balanced with Treasury, the GFEBs, and continuing with the Marine Corps audit. We did miss some of the interim goals, and frankly, it was probably because we didn't plan them well. So I think at this point, I don't feel disciplinary action is appropriate. I think encouragement is what is appropriate. We are making progress. I was taken aback by the numbers, but I believe she was right. Senator Yacht, who made that comment yesterday. We did miss a number of the interim goals, but I think we've hit the key goals, at least within the fiscal year, and we've got to pick up the pace. I understand that. I'm hoping for a learning curve here, both in terms of our ability to plan what we can carry out, but also our ability to know how to do it.
Let me pivot over to Ms. McGrath then. The senior executive staff, or what's the S for? The SES, Senior Executive Service, now have performance measures built into their evaluation process. Have you been at it long enough to have gone through a cycle yet where you've put the SES folks through a specific analysis of what their performance goal was versus what they did?
So we certainly did during last performance year's cycle. At the OSD level, they were proliferated across the OSD, and they were established for the military departments going into this year's cycle, and we're just at the tail end of this performance year.
Can you talk to us about what did or didn't happen to folks who either had a satisfactory performance against the goal they were assigned, or did not have satisfactory performance? Any actions taken at this stage?
So certainly the overall performance, the department has embedded the financial audit goals into its overarching
right, but I'm trying to get down to the individual level. Does anybody actually been yet held accountable for not getting something done they were supposed to get done?
So I would say yes. The department's overall performance against all of our goals, it would contribute to their, I'll call it their bonus calculation. So those have been in place, and what we've done in the existing year is proliferated them outside the financial space. So
okay.
the short answer is yes, they have. They've been in place.
Given that it's inappropriate to share individual names in here because of the privacy issues, I do think it's going to be helpful to those in the panel to see where, at least some statistics, that folks who didn't meet their goals were not as well compensated, or did not get compensated for not making those goals, and folks who did make those goals are in fact compensated. So that will be one of the things that we look at. Let me talk briefly in my time remaining on legacy systems. The folks on this side of the table are trying to figure out ways to kind of watch what goes on. The folks on your side of the table will know abundantly more about what's going on than we will. One of the measures I'm going to try to focus on and look at is continued legacy systems. We asked some folks in the Army yesterday, once they got the GFIBs done across all 211 sites, how many legacy systems would go away. They're at about 150-something sites now, so there would get a ways to go there. But at some point, we need a meaningful drop in the number of legacy systems being maintained. So is that a good tracking metric, Bob, or not?
I think it is. I'm going to ask Beth to add to that because it's more in her lane, but I believe it is. You'll need to be patient, and GFEB's made a decision not to not to try to bring all the old data, past data into the system. That greatly speeds up our ability to deploy this. Also means that for a period of time we're going to have to operate the old systems so that we can keep track of the legacy data, if you will. So it'll be a number of years before they go away. The other services have chosen a different approach, that is to bring the old data into the system. That means a huge job of data cleanup, which slows the implementation. I'm not sure which one is right. I'll go with their judgments. But yes, we do need to get rid of legacy systems.
So I would add that we currently publish an enterprise transition plan that identifies our target solutions, like the Army's accounting solution, the GFIB solution that we've talked about a couple of times. And in the enterprise transition plan, it identifies sunset dates for the legacy systems associated with the implementation of GFIBs. And so we do identify those with dates, and we monitor those as well, again, tied to auditability, but also reducing and rationalizing our overall IT footprint.
All right, thank you. Rob, for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you for the testimony. It appears that there has been some substantial progress in the Marine Corps area, Mr. Secretary, which you referred to. What are the lessons learned from that? What has led to the relative better progress in that area? I'm sure it's a smaller organization, has a lot to do with it, but what's led to the better progress there, and what have we learned needs still to be done there?
Well, I think the reason, and frankly, the Department of Navy in general is ahead, although the other services are working to catch up. Inter-service rivalry is a very powerful tool in the department, and
We've heard this
whenever I can. I learned that as the Air Force FM. The Navy has been investing steadily over the past 5-7 years. That's why they're ahead, and the Marine Corps in particular has strong commitment. So
investing in personnel, training,
both
software?
dollars, I think, and personnel, both. And across the board, not just the Marine Corps, although the Marine Corps is particularly focused. But we've learned a great deal. We learned first that we don't know what we don't know. We don't really fully understand in the Department of Defense what you have to do to pass an audit for a military service, because we've never done it. And you can't learn to swim on the beach. It's hard to talk to other agencies that tend to be different from us. So as the Marine Corps jumped in to try to swim, they found out they had a number of problems. Some of them were system related, although they've got a pretty decent and fairly integrated system. The real problems were business processes. We're just doing some things which are effective in terms of meeting warfighter needs, but aren't auditable. For example, we do bulk obligations of military pay. The auditors want it done in a much more detailed fashion. Sometimes we weren't doing basic and blocking and tackling appropriately. For example, we weren't taking people off access lists to financial systems when they left the base. They were busy, they just didn't get to it. The auditors looked and said, hey, there are people here that shouldn't have access. So we've got to correct those kinds of business processes.
Does the Department of Navy have more people relative to the size of organization working on this problem, or they have the same number of people doing it more effectively?
They think they have in the past. Now I'm less sure, because the other services have definitely bulked up here, and in terms of funding, they're right up. I've kind of used the Navy as a benchmark as I've looked at the other services, figuring they're making progress, probably need similar resources, and the other services are coming up to that level.
Mr. Khan, one of the things that you mentioned in your testimony is major weapons system maintenance and operating and support costs. Do you have any suggestions as to how we might require estimates of those operating and support costs be built into the upfront statement of the weapons system? In other words, one of the problems that's plagued us for a long time is we buy a weapons system and it winds up costing an awful lot more than we thought it was going to, in part because of the requirement creep, in part because of other problems, but I think and also in part because we understate the operating and support costs. What suggestions do you have that we might require bidders to build into their costs so we could more accurately anticipate what's coming?
Certainly, this issue starts, this process really does start in acquisition. I'm sorry. Can you hear me now? I'm sorry. It does start in the acquisition process, and what Ms. McGrath mentioned, that DOD is implementing an end-to-end process so that when you have a procurement, when you raise a purchase order, you begin to collect all the data which is necessary for accumulating the cost, the actual cost which is going to be spent on that particular product itself. So that, I mean, in our work, we have seen that is slow to happen in acquisition. To link that up with capturing the cost information, which can be meaningfully built into, if you will, a profile of whether it's weapon systems or even in the large system acquisitions. I think that will go a long way towards having more of a discipline so that you can true up the estimates with what the actual costs are.
Your agency did a compelling study that said we were $297 billion in cost overruns in 7 major weapon systems, I believe it was. Could you just guess what percentage of that 297 was misunderstanding of support and maintenance costs?
That would be a tough guess, sir.
If you could supplement the record later, I'd be curious.
I believe, I'll let J.O. supplement it, though, that was looking at those are the selected acquisition reports, and they were looking at the procurement and the investment costs associated with the weapons. I don't believe that any of that was associated with.
And I think I would I think you're right. I think I'd modify my question to say, could you make an interesting projection as to what follow-on costs behind the 297 are going to come because of this problem? That's a better way to frame it.
May I add
worse, but it makes
brief
it
point? May I add a brief point to that?
Sure.
It is a major issue in the Department of Defense, has been for as long as I've been associated with DOD. We tend to be overly optimistic about projections of operating and support costs, and we don't make decisions based on them. And you have to make that decision very early in the life of a weapon system to have any meaningful effect. In some cases, we're paying for game-changing capabilities. I think stealth capability has been extremely costly because every time you exercise with a weapon and hits a rock or a bird, you got to recode it. If you have to do maintenance, you have to recode. It's very expensive. On the other hand, it has been a warfighter game change. So I wouldn't always say higher operating costs are a bad idea. You have to judge them against what you get.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Scott, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I certainly thank our panel for getting up early. Mr. Chairman, I commend you for starting on time. I think in my 6 months here, this is the first and only meeting that's actually started on time, so I'm impressed by that. I also want to thank the ranking member, Andrews. I think the tone that's been set here is the tone that we need set. It is, I think it's actually, if I can go as far as to say it's beyond bipartisan, it's just American. Us trying to get our hands around this and work together. And I think that we're here today talking about the challenges faced in the accounting of DOD is of no surprise given the rapid increase in funding and the mission that was given to DOD after 9/11. Mr. Hale, I wanted to ask you, have you, given the complexity of DOD, it seems like this, of all endeavors, we'd have to slow down and be very thoughtful and very strategic about how you get your arms around this challenge here. And have you identified global challenges, those barriers that inhibit our ability to produce audited statements and on a global scale, but identified maybe a smaller sector that we could go after and see if we could get real success in a smaller sector? I know the government likes to have these acronyms and things like a center of excellence, and then ramp it up and move across. Now, I don't know that that's a profound statement at all, that you may have done that. Maybe that's reflected in the success that you've had in the Marine Corps. But if you could comment on that, it would be helpful to me.
First off, we've been pretty good at slowing down over the years. I'm not working to do that. I'd like to speed up. There are 2 broad problems that we've had and that were challenges we face. I would say one is better systems. Especially the Army and Air Force feel that their current systems simply cannot support auditability. And I'll give you just one example to try to make that more concrete. These systems don't keep track of data at the invoice level. And so when an auditor wants to check our payment, they want to see an invoice, they want to see a contract that backs up that invoice, and they want to see a receiving report. Right now what we have to do if we're going to audit that is manually go out and get those documents. And when you're doing samples of thousands, you can't do it in a timely fashion. The new systems keep track of this data, so you literally can hit a button if it's working right, and you will have the data available. So especially the Army and Air Force feel they must have the new systems. So that's one global problem. The other one's our business processes or financial controls. which are too variable and in some cases not strong enough to support audit. I mean, I would say they are reasonable. I know where we're spending the money in budget terms, and I would argue with those who say differently, but they aren't good enough to support audit. So we're going to have to improve them. We're working on teams to try to identify those and get our commands to start making changes now. At the same time, they're doing the systems. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do it. I want to do it concurrently, not sequentially. Finally, in terms of you've hit exactly what we're trying to do. We're trying to do this in a phased manner. The Marine Corps is a good first step, and these validations are also looking at pieces of this, and so we'll learn and I hope build up some successes as well as areas where we need to improve.
Well, I appreciate the answer. Maybe the second part of the question is still a bit unclear to me. If we have we identified a smaller sector, maybe a division, a branch, to say this is the one that we're really going to do very, very well, and then we're going to scale this up, lessons learned, best practices, and has that been done, or is it more you're trying to get your arms around the whole thing?
No, I think we've done exactly what you're saying. First, we picked budgetary information as our major focus, and the reason we did that is because it's most used to manage. Then within that, the Marine Corps is our smallest service. It's also the least complex because the Navy handles a lot of its procurements. And so it's a good starting point, and we're learning a great deal. But I don't want to just focus on the Marine Corps and have the Air Force.
It's okay. I think
sit over there and do nothing.
A lot of Marines on the panel. It's okay if you want to.
We're counting on the Marine Corps for a financial beachhead and to hold it too. I want the other services to be active. We can't audit their whole statement yet. We're not close enough to do that. So that's why we pick these validations. We're picking pieces that are key. The Air Force for funds balance with Treasury, the Army to look at its system. So I think we have a phased approach. We call them waves.
Okay.
That attempts to do this.
Thank you. In my remaining 15 seconds, could you provide the committee? We may have this. I don't believe we do, though. Could you provide the committee with the observations and recommendations from the outside auditors? And I'm not talking about reams of papers, but if you could condense that, summarize it. What are the outside auditors, to the extent that that can be summarized in 4 or 5 pages, and specifically if there are any legislative, and this may be going to the end of the book, the last page of the book, but are there any legislative suggestions that they may have made? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Hale.
All right. Thanks, Scott. Tim, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm reading here through the GAO report. And one of the issues that they brought up here is the limited ability to identify, aggregate, and use financial management information for managing and controlling operating and support costs. What are you specifically doing to try to get that more information, and how much of that, I would imagine a good deal of it, you will be interfacing with contractors to try to get that information?
Yeah, certainly in some cases we'll use contractor support, although the overall process needs to be led by government employees. First, I'd say that for budgetary information, I mean, when you make an appropriation to us, we can track whether or not we meet that appropriation. The appropriations received that I spoke of is the process we use at the start to distribute the money in a manner consistent with the laws that Congress enacts. And then we do have ability to track that, and I can go through that. You heard it when I was giving the briefing a week ago. If you want, I'll go through it again. But there's some external corroboration of that. We have about 3,000 auditors watching our every program and financial move. Generally, our violations of the Anti-Deficiency Act, which essentially says you weren't doing what the law told you, are quite low, very much lower, I might add, than the non-defense agencies taken as a whole. So I have reasonable confidence in the data, that we know where we're spending the data as you tell us. What gets hard is when you want to start getting cost data, which is very important, when you want to figure out what the JSF, Joint Strike Fighter, cost to operate, that requires special studies. Our systems just can't do that. We can do the studies, but they take time, and so we need to improve there. And overall, we do need audits to verify that the information is correct. I'm pretty sure it's in the right spots, and therefore I have reasonable confidence in the data we're using to make decisions, but I fully accept that we need audits to verify that point.
So what,
I answered your question.
well, what, like, I'm not an accountant, so I'm trying to
Neither am I.
wrap my brain around this. You're not getting enough good information. Is that fair? Is that what the GAO is saying here?
That's certainly.
So what are you doing to get the more information to eventually figure this out?
I'd say in some cases we don't have good information, and overall we don't have audits to verify the quality of that information. There are some good points. Like I said, I think our budgetary information, when you appropriate something in Army weapons and track combat vehicles and tell us to spend it a certain way, we can track that.
Well, what it says here, and maybe the GAO would like to chip in here. I mean, what your report here is saying is that this is a repair costs, maintenance, contract services. It seems, or feel free to chime in too. You know, it seems like those are pretty standard requests to know, okay, what on the Joint Strike Fighter, what are the repair costs, what are the maintenance costs, and I'm having trouble figuring out what the issue is here.
Yeah, let me just turn that off. Let me just build on my response to Mr. Andrews' question. The issue is cost here. I mean, DOD does have very good estimates, which they have developed themselves, but they have to be trued up with the actual cost information. And that's where acquisition process comes into it, because they're the primary people dealing with the contractors. So it has to be set up front, the expectation with the contractors that they need specific cost information to be broken down in a certain way, which DOD systems and DOD processes can take into their systems to be able to develop that and match that with the estimates.
Okay, so are we doing that with the contractors now?
So part of the, so today's environment, as Mr. Hale has articulated, the systems weren't designed to do cost accounting, and I'm not an accountant either. But as Mr. Hale also articulates, we know where the money goes. It's the actual cost of doing, repairs and those kind of things. And so the enterprise resource planning systems, many of the systems that we've been talking about, the target solutions are being designed such that we can capture that cost information, have the actual data that says that we can do forecasting for maintenance and sustainment of those systems, so that we're actually using real data to establish both our inventory needs and our forecasting. So it's a long way of saying that we're through the development of the business enterprise architecture. We're developing standard financial information standards along with logistics-based standards to ensure, say, at the end of the day, that we can aggregate the data, have the cost information, so that we're not, that we can have those estimates that GAO has articulated that we don't currently have today.
Okay, I'm out of time. Thank you, Mr.
I'll take one more shot because I don't feel I've been helpful. Let me take the JSF as an example. If you want its operating costs, you're going to have to look at our personnel information. You're going to have to look at our day-to-day operation and maintenance information. You have to look at spare parts. Those are all in separate appropriations. If you wanted that now, you could not punch a button and get it. You would have to get a team of experienced analysts to go in, look at the budgetary data in those categories, in some cases estimate what portion were attributable to the JSF, and come up with that data. When you're done with that study, I think you'd have reasonable information to make a decision, but it's slow, and we don't have an audit that verifies that all of the information is correct. So it's a nuanced answer. Yes, I can get something that would help a commander make a decision, but it'll take a long time, and it will require specialized expertise, contractors and others. And again, there's no audit to verify its capability. I hope that's helpful. It's not a black or white answer. It's not we don't have any information. It's just not as readily available, and sometimes it's not as high quality as I would like.
But still a good rationale for continuing pushing on this issue to get this done at the end of the day.
Yes, but to be honest, when even we got an audit, it wouldn't solve.
No, but you're going to have systems in place that can sustain the audits and do those kinds of analysis quicker,
You will have
more nimble.
somewhat quicker, yes.
And so, Todd Young for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to all our panelists. I do appreciate you being here early this morning. Mr. Khan, I appreciated your 6 pillars, if you will, of change that, as you see, must occur in order to really begin to tackle this challenge in a serious way. I would further reduce those into a few different buckets. If you give me liberty, one would be processes, another would be systems, and then finally we have people. And you put people first in terms of your comments. I don't know if these were order or priority, but it strikes me they were. Certainly if we're going to have any sort of lasting change here, we're going to have sustaining, committed leadership. We're going to have to institutionalize whatever plans we develop here. And we also need people with the appropriate skill set to be able to add some value to this overall process. And so I would ask you or anyone here on the panel what we've done first to try and, from the beginning, I think we need to be thinking about institutionalizing whatever plans are put in place here. So what have we done to ensure that we're going to have sustaining, committed leadership across administrations with respect to the fire plan? And then secondarily, what is being done with respect to assessing the skills needed within DOD in order to make sense of this and to then build that skilled workforce?
Perhaps the biggest concern of mine is sustained commitment to this over time. That really depends. I mean, we've got it right now. I care about this. I learned it in my Air Force FM days. I cared about it then. I care about it now. But frankly, the people that sit in my chair have generally been, I like to use the phrase, budget junkies. There's a heavy focus on budget. Now, I consider myself a budget junkie. I am working, constantly watching what you're doing right now to the budgets and very concerned. So it's important that we have somebody that's my successor or somebody at senior levels who knows something and care about the audits. I won't be able to do anything about that. I'd urge you to do what you can to ensure that, and it will obviously be very important that the Deputy Secretary and the Secretary care about it as well. Sustained leadership over a couple of administrations will be required to make this happen. Let me turn to the workforce. I think generally there are about 68,000 people in the defense financial management workforce, roughly 58,000 government civilians, and about 10,000, these are in the so-called GS 500 series, and about 10,000 military personnel. I think generally they are well trained, but we haven't been as systematic about that as I would like. We are starting to do that in two respects. One, completed a competency review, figuring out what they ought to know. I mean, I think we generally knew that, but we've been more specific. And second, we've asked for legislative authority, and you've given it to us, as has the Senate, so I hope it will come out of conference, to impose a course-based certification program on for defense financial managers, analogous to the Defense Acquisition Workforce Improvement Act, the DOE legislation for acquisition, which would allow a framework, and we would require certain courses for certain jobs, and auditability and accounting would be one of them. So I believe that it's generally a well-trained workforce based on my experience with it, especially at the senior levels, but I think a more systematic approach would be appropriate. You're scowling at me. Did I answer your question?
No, you did, and actually when sustained committed leadership was said, I wasn't necessarily thinking about just the top people in the organization, and perhaps that is what you meant, Mr. Khan, but I thought institutionally things might be implemented so that we didn't have it didn't require each administration to appoint enlightened people. Maybe we could do things that would ensure that they stayed focused on this problem.
Right, Mr. Young. I mean, that's why I emphasize the human capital or the well-trained workforce. I think that's going to go a long way towards helping institutionalizing some of the topics we are talking about today. This is to drive transformation. This is change management process. And without having a well-trained workforce in a very complex environment, that is going to be a huge challenge. I think Congress recognized that there was a requirement in National Defense Authorization Act of 2006 for DOD to perform a skill set analysis, if you will, and then do a gap analysis of what the to-be requirements are for the skill sets and where they were currently and what the plan was to transition. So that is going to be key. I mean, it's a complex environment, and then financial management itself is a technically complex area. So you're dealing with several different moving parts here. So the process and systems issue has received attention, but human capital is equally important, and without that, the elements aren't going to come together.
But I don't think this will succeed unless the Secretary, Deputy, and Comptroller in both OSD and the services care about it and make a high priority of it. It won't happen.
Can I also add, though, that
Please.
we are, from an institutional perspective, baking it into the summary justification of the budget. So there are performance measures that are identified as part of the budget submission. They're part of the overall GPRA Modernization Act that says these are our top priorities. It's part of the strategic management plan. We're utilizing the business enterprise architecture to tie directly to achieving the financial auditability outcome, leveraging the investment review board process. So when systems do come in for development and modernization, there's that connectivity. So from an institutional perspective, we are using all of the levers that are there. That notwithstanding, I don't disagree with Mr. Hill's point about the leadership, top-down driven requirement must happen.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. To Sub Joe for 5 minutes.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Gates, when he's been before the full committee, has said over and over again that the department's getting eaten alive by health care costs. Mr. Khan, in your report, you mentioned a problem that GAO identified with TRICARE in terms of misclassification. And I was wondering, first of all, is that just a sort of anecdotal, sui generis incident, or is that something that you think is a broader-based problem? Second question is, and this is just showing my lack of knowledge, is TRICARE done service by service, or is this a program that is administered by the Pentagon in one place? And given the fact that that's sort of a hot spot in terms of the Pentagon's budget, I mean, is there efforts that are being focused in terms of this area? Because, again, it's something the Secretary said repeatedly to our committee. So, Mr. Khan, maybe you can just talk about the report that you submitted.
Yes, I mean, that was an accounting misclassification of information. I mean, that is one instance that we have highlighted. There were several other instances where, this goes down to the basic fundamentals of bookkeeping, coding of information to make sure that it has correct classification. These are the building blocks of financial reports. If the information is not being accumulated and aggregated at the correct level under the correct classifications, the information is going to be mischaracterized in the financial statement. So you will end up with certain types of information to be understated and other types of information to be overstated. So this really points towards the importance of having that discipline so that when you pull together the financial statements, that you have reasonable assurance that the information that you have in front of you is accurate. This comes to all the decision-making process. If you're making important decisions of where you want to reduce certain activity, where you want to increase activity, or where you can have any cuts, this type of information is going to be very useful.
TRICARE is managed centrally in the department. The services obviously participate, but it's managed centrally. And yes, it is a major problem, and we have made two broad proposals, one to achieve some efficiencies in the TRICARE Management Agency, and they're working right now to implement those. Going to do fewer contractors, fewer people to reduce the overhead. The other one is to make some changes in the benefits, particularly to working age retirees. And we have both in the military health care area, we have made a set of proposals, and I very much appreciate the fact that the House supported those proposals in almost all cases. And generally, the Senate Armed Services Committee has too. So I would hope that we will get authority, for example, for modest increases in the enrollment fee for working age retirees in TRICARE and some changes in pharmacy copays. These are tough votes, I recognize that, but some of this is getting out of hand, and we need to begin to make some modest changes in those benefits. So I appreciate your support.
Well, again, I understand that's certainly one way to save money in a system is to obviously shift some costs to the beneficiaries. And again, that debate's already taken place. I guess the question is, though, that, what I think we would appreciate is having some confidence in knowing that the program's being administered as efficiently as possible. And the GAO criticism seems to suggest that there's problems there. And I guess that's sort of is the Pentagon making efforts to really try and make sure before they come to Congress asking beneficiaries to pay more that you feel good about whether or not the management is up to speed?
We made a whole series of efforts prior to proposing those beneficiary increases to look for ways to hold down the growth in costs. For example, we were able to use the veterans pricing scheme for pharmaceuticals, which saved us, I want to say, $500 million a year. Let me correct that for the record, but it was substantial savings. We have looked at a variety of management improvements to deliver the care more carefully. The miscategorization, I need to look more carefully at the GAO report. I don't have enough details to give the answer. But I can tell you that before we asked for those benefit increases, even though I think they're, or increases in enrollment fees, even though I think they're fully justified, we tried to do everything we could to try to make the system more efficient. Can we do more? Yes. There's an ongoing review right now of TRICARE and the rest of the military health system looking for additional efficiencies. And I would hope that coming out of that would be some further recommendations next year to the Congress.
Thanks, Joe. Rob, you okay?
Yes.
All right. Well, Bob, Beth, and Asif, thank you for coming. I guess as just in concluding here, Bob, particularly you and Beth are spectacular professionals, and you say all the right things. And to someone who just came walking in and sat down, you would think you guys almost have it done because you're really good at telling us all these things. As this panel progresses, diving deeper into the weeds, so to speak, I want that sense of urgency somehow to be seen other places, or a sense of urgency seen other places. Bob, you told us last week that, nobody gets up thinking about September 30th, 2017, and that you've got to make interim progress, incremental progress to make this happen. And a 5 for 25 on that first round of on the fire plan. What I don't want to see happen, though, is to set the bar so low on those goals that you go 25 for 25 because you didn't push yourselves far enough to make that happen. So there's a balance in there. You put it too far out there and you get discouraged because you don't get there. You put it too low and you waste time as well. So this panel is going to be committed to trying to figure out how Congress can put that institutional continuity or sustainability of focus in place so that over these next 6 years that we get this done. You and your predecessors are going to be, integral parts of that. So thank you for coming this morning at 8 o'clock. Rob, you any closing remarks?
Well, I just want to associate myself with the chairman's remarks here. We see tangible progress, and we want to work with you to make that happen. But frankly, the reason this panel exists is to guarantee that progress. So we're hopeful we have a kindred spirit in Secretary Panetta. We know we have kindred spirits on your team, but we want to do more than spirit. We want the body as well. And the panel is, on a bipartisan basis, committed to that kind of oversight. I appreciate the opportunity to speak this morning.
All right. Thank you all very much. Hearing's adjourned.